All right, it looks like everybody is in right now. All right, we can get started. Joe, you want to introduce Gil? We can take off.
Yeah, not really. Everyone here knows Gil. Hey guys, Gil's got a training to do, so here he is. You guys remember Gil from the real estate team, right? Here he is. Ta-da!
I've seen that guy before.
Thank you for that introduction, Joe. I'm double zoomed.
You've seen him at Summertime Surf School. You've seen him at the Joe Oz Real Estate Group. Don't call him late. Call him anything, but don't call him late for dinner.
That was beautiful, Joe.
For getting this on my iPad. Yeah, I thought I'd be able to do earpods, but I can't. All right, what's up? Our whole crew's here. No strangers. No holds barred. All right, let me share my screen.
Yeah, for real though. Yeah, this is the awesome thing that Gil does. Like Gil kind of understands the higher level of what everyone's going through. You know, and he probably he takes a temperature on how everyone's feeling. I know that Gil came into this business and Gil took 50 listings in his first year of being a realtor. Him and I did it together, and yeah, there's a lot of what's important to us in this, and what's important to us in this real estate team is work-life balance, right? Like the reason that you're here is probably because, well, the reason that you're here is, and I was just talking to Jill, we were talking about like the realtors she's working with and how everyone's always reacting, right? They're not thinking, they're always reacting. Nobody's breathing, nobody has control of anything, and there's a lot of stress involved. And what Gil's gonna dive into is kind of like how to just deal with that, right? And so like Gil and I, and I'll just share this about Gil, like Gil and I connected very early. When Gil and I first met, a conversation, like his goal was, his big goal was to build a wave pool, which was, and it was more than that, it was around like mindfulness. And he was talking about like, I had just discovered the Headspace meditation app, and Gil like had already like studied these things. He knew like what their net, like what these companies were valued at, like Calm, and where they were going. And Gil was very early on, he pointed out to me something that that he had been thinking about a lot longer than I had, or I had, you know, this had just gotten on my radar, was that, you know, the world that we're living in, man, like nobody slows down. No one takes a breath. No one's relaxing. No one's like really doing what needs to be done. And, you know, Gil was pointing out to me that these, you know, like these meditation apps were connecting to like, you know, they're opening up spots in the airport where you can get a massage, or you can like sit down and meditate and things like that. And you know, Gil has a lot to say about this. It's something that's really important to him, and it's really important to me. And we're really lucky to have someone in our organization that's going to prepare a training like this and talk to you guys about this. Because if you don't have your mind, this is like the put the oxygen mask on first thing. Like if you don't have your head right, and if you guys know me, I spend probably about 45 minutes to an hour every single morning on prayer, meditation, reading, journaling. And that's just so I can like get through the day and you know, really be of service to others. So go ahead, Gil, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yo, my pleasure. This is sort of self-serving, like a little bit selfish, where I've had to explain this to a lot of people, and I've been trying to utilize this as a tool to share with people. B, it's an experiment for myself, something I've wanted to get into teaching a little bit, or sharing at least. And I have this conversation a lot, and I've learned to record conversations that I have a lot, and then be able to just send a link to people in the interest of time. So anyway, this is version 1.0 of just sharing this kind of life hack that I've, you know, come upon, you know, in sort of a rational way. So intro to mindfulness and meditation version 1.0. So this is just a quick chat. The disclaimer here is that I am not the Dalai Lama. His Holiness or whatever you call this guy. I actually saw him speak one time. He's pretty rad. I'm nowhere near this guy or whatever. I'm just a dude sitting in his dining room this morning taking a picture of himself meditating. So that said, I'm also not Kelly Slater. And the analogy that I'm trying to draw here is that Kelly Slater is by and large the best surfer to ever walk the face of the planet. He is number one, right? There's 7.8 billion people in the world though. And in surfing, I am a relative nobody. Like even amongst my peer group and my friends locally, I don't compete in terms of ability and skill level. But that said, if you zoom out to the whole entire population of humanity, 7.8 billion people or whatever it is right now, the top 1%, I'm better than, there's not 78 million people that are better at surfing than I am, right? There's probably not 7.8 million people that are better than surfing than I am. There's only 35 million surfers on the planet. Joe's one of them. And we all know that I'm way better at surfing than Joe. So I might be somewhere near the top, in between the top 0.1% and the top 0.01% of surfers in my own personal ability. Right. And that is still saying that, acknowledging humbly that I can barely even get a wave at my own local spots. Right. But I can do what's in this photo, and that is something to be said. So I'm drawing the analogy here that even though I'm not Kelly Slater, I do have a certain level of competency and skill set in that domain. I've been able to translate that domain into teaching into a scalable system that is one of the, if we talk about who's the best surf school operators in the world, I'm probably in the top 0.0001% of that with my partners, right? Who's able to build a scalable system to get people from zero surfing to standing up and riding a wave into the 35 million, from the 7.6 billion to the 35 million, to be able to feel the experience and understand what it's like, and then it's on them to go progress. We can even get people to advanced levels, maybe not as even as far as me, but definitely not as far as Slater so far. But the point remains, we can get people the basics in a packaged, predictable manner at scale. And I've been able to translate my passion that I'm sort of okay at relatively in the planet and into a scalable system in teaching surfing. Now, in 2016, I got super into, and actually in 2013, I got really exposed to meditation through surfing. So I was trying to get better at surfing. I wanted to hold my breath longer, so I took a free diving course in Bali, right? Holding your breath and diving straight down the line. The teacher of that, the guy who moved to Bali to open up a free diving school, happened to be a meditation teacher who used free diving as a moving meditation. I was going there to learn to hold my breath, to surf bigger waves more comfortably. And I got my mind open to meditation and mindfulness through static apnea and breathing and things like that, or dynamic apnea and free diving. So it was a really easy translation. It was like the Rosetta Stone for me, from surfing to mindfulness and meditation. Now, since then, I've gotten way more into it. We'll talk about that in a second. The thing about meditation, though, or mindfulness or whatever, is it's almost invisible in terms of I can show you a picture of me getting barreled and you can understand that I can surf. I'm showing you a picture of me this morning on my floor meditating on a 10-second timer to get the photo. Right? And you can't tell how mindful I am. You can't tell if it's my first time or I've been doing it for 10,000 hours or whatever that looks like. It's a lot, talk about how it's sort of invisible. So in terms of teaching it, I don't know how effective I'll be at that. This is really the first time I've actually tried to convey some of these ideas and thoughts to people. So you guys are the guinea pigs. It's really just an introduction to the concepts. I'm not going to do a guided meditation or any of that kind of shit. It's really just kind of laying the landscape and selling the idea that it's something that you should kind of get into. I went off the deep end, so to say, or really deeply into this in 2015, I want to say. I heard Tim Ferriss on his podcast. He was like, this is like meditation on steroids. And what he was talking about was floating. So I'd been primed to be into meditation and sort of got into it. I downloaded Headspace and was kind of into it, but I didn't really develop it a bunch. But I was open to it. And then when I heard this, he was talking about floating, float therapy. This is like a sensory deprivation tank. You go into an Epsom salt bath that's essentially like a foot deep. It's got 800 pounds of Epsom salt in it. You go in there, you close the lid, you turn off the light, sound. The idea is that you are reducing your sensory input to your nervous system, attenuating that to a level where it's really just your awareness and consciousness left. This was invented by a guy named John Lilly. There's a whole thing behind it. Anyway, I was so enamored by this idea. The way that it was described on this podcast was, if I was to describe what it feels like when I'm surfing like this, it's what's called a flow state. Your sense of time expands, or you don't really have a sense of time. You're fully in the present moment, whatever that sounds like. It sounds really esoteric and kind of like bullshit. But that, if you try to ask somebody to describe that's really into surfing what it's like to get barreled, and they're gonna get word soup like that. What they're trying to do is bring something that's ineffable, a flow state, into their normal vocabulary. They're trying to describe something that's indescribable. And when the experience of the float tank was described to me, it sounded like a direct translation of what I am trying to communicate when I say that I get these 10-second juice or whatever, or fully in the barrel. Like all that stuff that I can't put into words, somebody put into words something that sounded very similar to that. The thing that was crazy to me was I wasn't surrounded by a 10-foot tube of water moving at 100 miles an hour. It was in the dark with no stimulation whatsoever, but they sounded the same. So that was like insanely intriguing to me, to the point where I listened to this podcast on an airplane. As soon as I landed and had Wi-Fi, we were flying to California for a wedding. As soon as I landed, like at the baggage claim, I found a float center where our Airbnb was, and I booked a float for the next day. Like I could not wait to try this. So I tried it, and I had this like ineffable experience. Like I've always described, it wasn't an out of body experience, but it felt like I had no body, like no physical body. And it was really weird, but it was really awesome. And I was that afternoon, having already started the surf school and seen some traction with it. This is like in 2015. I was already, 4 or 5 years into building the surf school. I decided that I knew that day, I was like, if I had to choose between surfing and floating for the entire rest of my life, I knew that there was something there in floating that I would definitely pick floating instead of surfing. And my wife and my best friends and everybody were like, you are insane. That's crazy. And I was like, well, there's something really there to it if I'm saying that. I didn't go crazy. The awesome part is you can do both. And you don't have to pick. So I wrote these articles on Medium. I'll give everybody links to them and stuff, but I wrote this article in 2019 as like a first version of explaining this whole thing, and some links and things like that in there. Then there's the one that's about Sam Harris there is really about the Waking Up app, his meditation app, and like how that market's going, and it's sort of from an investment perspective, but analyzing the business behind all this. If you're into this, I would read both of those things. They're pretty rad. But I'll share some of that with you. So like, all right. So now to try to explain what this is and how it relates, and the topic that I put on to the real estate training or whatever is like how to make more money in real estate. And this is like 100% true. I promise I'll get to exactly how this is practical. And what I'm trying to do is like explain what it is, and then give you guys some practical reasons why it can help you in your business and your life, and then some resources so that you can pursue it if you want. When we're talking about all this stuff, or when I'm trying to explain this, you realize very quickly that there's this phrase called the map is not the territory. So words and vocabulary and the English language is really just kind of like vaguely pointing in the direction of what these ineffable things that you're trying to describe when you're talking about consciousness and meditation and mindfulness. They're very slippery terms, is a phrase that people use. You can't say like, that's a compass, and that word directly embodies the idea that you're describing in someone else's mind. They're subjective experiences, and it's in the first person, so it's really hard to put it into words. So it's just acknowledging that fact of this scenario here. So I'm just going to go through some of those words in the first place. So consciousness, when I use that word, really what we're referring to is I put in here the awareness of the experience of existing. And that sounds really heady or whatever, but this is that people use the phrase like, "Are the lights on?" Is the light of consciousness. If you hear that phrase or that's sort of described, this is what I want you to think of. Ask yourself this question: what is it like to be the Rock? In either example here, we're talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the living legend, and we're talking about the literal Rock on the left there. Who can tell me what it's like to be the Rock on the left?
I cannot tell you what that's like.
Why not?
'Cause I've never been a Rock.
Have you ever been Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson?
Not while I was awake. No.
If you dropped one of the weights that the Rock lifts to be the Rock on the Rock's toe, if the Rock dropped one of the weights and you saw that on YouTube, could you imagine what it might feel like for him to drop that on his foot? In any
Oh,
way,
definitely.
shape, or form? You're right. You can sort of map your mind onto what it's like to be the Rock, right? In that way. Is there something that it's like to be Dwayne Johnson? Yes. The answer is we all kind of understand and agree that that person has some experience that is subjective to from his first person point of view. If he drops a weight on his foot, it's probably going to hurt his toes. You've dropped something on your toes and you sort of have an idea of what that's like, right? You can put yourself in their shoes in some certain sense. Now, is there something that it's like if you drop a weight on a rock, does the rock notice anything? The rock on the left, the actual physical piece of granite or whatever that is. The answer is, as far as we can tell, no. Right? There is not really anything that it's like to be a rock. The rock does not have any consciousness on the left. Right? But Dwayne Johnson is a conscious entity. Right? There's a spectrum of consciousness. And we just did a bifurcation of like 0 to 1. Like there's no consciousness in the physical granite, and there is consciousness in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now there's a spectrum. Is there something that it's like to be an octopus or an ant, right?
Sure.
And what we're getting at here is that these are conscious creatures, and the Rock is not one of them, right? Which of these does not belong, right? So we need to understand that that's like part of the way that we can describe like what consciousness is. So keep that in mind. Now, when we talk about thoughts, this is like what our self-awareness is all about. If you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he can say, "Ow, I dropped a weight on my toe," right? That's a thought that I dropped a weight on my toe. He notices that happened, or I stubbed my toe. Jerry Seinfeld, who's also, by the way, super into meditation. He's like, pain is information entering the body very quickly. When you're walking in the dark and you stub your toe, that's information coming into your nervous system really fast. That's what pain is, right? So we use this analogy of like thought bubbles, and you want to be ultimately what we're going to end up talking about is like being aware of those thoughts as they arise, as opposed to being carried away in one of these thought bubbles and being totally consumed by it. So then the word meditation, just this vocabulary word, what it looks like on the internet and in pictures is the Buddhist monk in the orange robe on the left. This is what people kind of have in their mind. What it can very much look like is this dude in a suit in his office chair on the right, right? You can meditate at any time. You can actually be meditating as you're walking, as you're surfing. Like you can have moving meditation. You can blur the line between what this monk is doing, sitting in a cave on a silent retreat or whatever, and like living your daily life. And part of the goal is to be able to do that, where you're making your entire life a meditation, where you are constantly in a state of mindfulness, right? Which is the next vocabulary word. It's the act of deliberately paying attention to and attempting to notice your thoughts as they arise. This is referred to as like practicing, right? And if the analogy is like working out to build the skill of awareness, right? Which is mindfulness. And I use this picture of Neo from The Matrix, where he's like bending over backwards when the bullets are coming, because he can sort of slow down time or whatever that is in the Matrix. And then this is obviously fiction, but the analogy carries where imagine your thoughts are like bullets coming at you, and you're able to slow down just enough to be able to dodge them or eventually stop it and sort of control it or pick which one you want to choose and move forward with, right? Mindfulness is the state of present moment awareness where you're fully aware of what's going on, including your thoughts. You're noticing your thoughts and experiences as they arrive in your consciousness, right? Consciousness is the lights are on. Meditation is trying to build the practice to be able to be mindful for an extended period of time. When you first start, you may not be able to do this at all. You're actually just thinking with your eyes closed, right? After a while, you can start to have you can extend the amount of time that you're able to walk along the tightrope of being aware of your thoughts as they're arising. It'll be microseconds at first, be a couple seconds, and then the goal is to eventually expand that out to more and more little interruptions throughout your day, where in the course of the 24 hours, however many seconds that is, you may be able to only do it for 4 seconds in a 20-minute sitting meditation when you start. And then eventually you want to be able to punctuate your day at various points, like transitioning from activity to activity, and have more and more time throughout that 24-hour day of seconds where you are in this state of mindfulness. The antonym of this, like defining something by the opposite, is when you're completely lost in thought, or your attention and awareness is carried away by something else. Where this starts to become, useful is like if somebody says something to you that pisses you off or triggers you, i.e. some stupid client or some asshole agent or whatever in the context of real estate. If they trigger you, if you're not aware that you're getting triggered and why, or being able to separate yourself and your ego from that situation, you're going to run on that train and blurt out something that's probably going to be unhelpful to what you're actually trying to do in that moment. If you have awareness that that's happening, and then you can be like Neo, pick which thought, or just pause for just a millisecond and choose a better thing to say, you're going to be better at your role. You're going to get more information out of people. You're going to be able to control your reaction better than you would otherwise. And that's going to get you closer. It's going to get you the results that you want in all aspects of your life, but especially in real estate deals and talking on the phone more often. Mindfulness and flow state are sort of neurological and neurochemically similar, but they're not identical. They're like cousins. When you study the neuroscience behind all this, they're not identical. You can look at fMRI studies and things like that, but they're related. They're not the same, but they are related. So that's sort of how they sound the same. Another little helpful analogy here is, can anybody tell me what's in this picture? Put in the chat
The
box.
dinosaur.
I should have said put in the chat box.
Oh, sorry.
Give me a thumbs up if you can see the dinosaur.
There's a dinosaur.
There's 100% a dinosaur.
I gotta blow it up.
Yeah, I
Hold on.
think Katie's right. I see like a couple sailboats.
I see the dinosaur's eyes.
It is a
Wow.
schooner.
If
right.
you see a
Schooner is a sailboat, dummy.
if you see a sailboat, please send me the drugs that you're on.
I don't see anything. I see a pattern.
You see a pattern, right? So understand and trust me that this is not a trick. This is like a magic eye. If you've never seen these before, there's stereogram. We call it stereogram. So embedded in this pattern, if you look at this in a certain way, there is a picture of a dinosaur embedded in this image. And the way to see it is to actually try to look past the image. Like imagine you're looking at your phone. If you're in your car, try to look at the plane. When I say plane, I mean like look about 10 inches behind your phone and the screen, Like try to focus your eyes on your steering wheel and have your phone in your hand. We'll leave it up for another second, see if you can get it. Is there anybody that only sees a random pattern and is then able to see the dinosaur afterwards?
I see nothing.
Still only seeing the random pattern. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
random pattern.
I'll email you guys.
No
the picture.
dinosaur.
Would you originally see a random pattern and then see the dinosaur pop out?
No, neither. I never saw the dinosaur.
Sam, I know you're
Not at all. Can't see it.
Oh.
Check for the eyes. If you could see the eyes, you could see the dinosaur.
all right. So there's something interesting happening here where a certain segment of the people on the Zoom are able to see the dinosaur clear as day. It's actually in 3D.
Yeah.
And there's a certain segment of people that are like, you guys are fucking crazy, and this is just a random pattern of red and orange and white, right?
No.
Understand that there is a there. The phrase that's from this book, Altered Traits, is that there is a there. Like, I'm not making this up. There is actually a dinosaur there. If you can't see it, that should be interesting to you, and you should be able to figure out how to see it. And that analogy carries over to what I'm ineffably trying to describe in this scenario, where if you're able to, you can, the same way you can shift from seeing the pattern to seeing the dinosaur, you can shift your awareness to understand another perspective on your own, like, first person existence. And if you can do that, sounds crazy, I understand, but I'm telling you that it is possible. Like, this is a book of science from Harvard scientists that say there is a there is the too long didn't read version of this book. And if you do, it will make your life radically better over time. So you use that as an analogy. It's the same exact thing where people are like, I don't get it, but it's definitely there. Same thing happens with this ability to shift in and out of a state of mindfulness. So that's awesome. That's all sounds really cool. Now, what does this mean in the real world? So this is actually from a pitch deck that I did I tried to open up a float center to, like, share this with people in a business sense. This was from the pitch deck in 2016. The world is fucking crazy, right? There's all this stuff going on, and our brains and bodies are not designed to live in this environment and kind of react to trying to see everybody with views gone on and off. So we're not built to live in this modern environment, right? So this picture is a obviously a rendering, but the part of your brain that's lit up there is called your amygdala, and that is like your fight or flight version. That's like the sensor for your flight or flight version of your brain from a neuro anatomy standpoint. So what's happening now is when you get pinged or you have an awareness, it like triggers your amygdala. What's happening now is, like, you get a ping on your cell phone. Like, our brains are designed to, like, react to a fire or a saber-toothed tiger or some other, like, hominoid, like, coming to get us, or, like, something dangerous, lightning, right? To, like, run away and be fearful of those life or death.
Uh-oh.
Now the world has evolved to the point where that gets triggered.
Gil, just so you know, you're breaking up a little bit.
I'm breaking up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you did for just a minute, but you're back now.
you were skipping.
Our brains get hijacked by sensory input that's not actually life threatening. So what's actually happening, it's important to understand this, because this all leads into kind of objectifying this. This is the chemical symbol for cortisol, which is the stress hormone for your body. So when your body gets reacted to some sort of stress, a phone call that you want to make, if you're nervous to have a conversation with a client and they call you when you owe them something, right? I'll bring it into real estate context. You owe somebody an update, or there's some sort of issue or problem. You got a kill letter, but the client saw the kill letter before you called them, and then they're calling to blow up. Whatever that scenario is, and you feel that stress response, you're not actually in a life-threatening scenario right there. But you're going to feel that. Who can describe what that feels like when you feel your stress response coming? You've gotten one of these phone calls.
Anxiety.
Physically describe what that, how does that feel in your body? Like what does
Uh,
that feel like?
Here.
Almost like an
Fear.
upset stomach.
You feel it in your stomach? Where else does anybody else feel it?
Like a tightness
My
in the
belly
chest.
getting bigger.
Right? Where else?
I usually feel it in my chest.
What is
My shoulders tense up.
tense,
My-
tension,
Yeah,
nausea,
tension, my neck.
tension in your neck, like a contracted feeling, right? You get that feeling, you're like, oh, look, oh, that phone call's coming. And it might be mild. Like if you think to one of these phone calls, it's not going to be like, you're not going to curl up in a ball, right? But you do sort of have this like instant recoil of like, oh, like shit. That feeling, what's happening in your body is you're getting a little bit of your body's producing cortisol, like a stress hormone. When that happens, right, there's a stressor, your amygdala gets triggered a little bit to certain degrees, and then your body produces and releases cortisol into the system. And when that happens, another after effect of that is if you were running away, this is from Monty Python, obviously the greatest movie of all time. If there was a fire, your body is going to be like, oh my God, there's a fire. I need to run away. And that floods your system with sugar, stored sugar from your diet and your fat in your body and everything else. Your body's going to have that glucose release into your body so that you can run, your muscles are ready to use it to run away. So understanding that thing now, there's a technology, you can't really directly measure cortisol is what I'm trying to get at. So like, how do you measure how stressed you are? Like you can't just take your temperature and be like, that's my stress, right? You can measure your fever, you can measure COVID, you could measure your cholesterol, right? You can actually measure cortisol, but it's very invasive and it's sort of complicated. Now, this is a technology that's sort of new. It's called continuous glucose monitoring. It's designed for diabetics, right? You put that little needle with the finger thing onto your arm, like this athlete guy, and you can get a every 5-minute reading or every 3-minute reading of your glucose level, your blood glucose level. And this is like it's not a direct correlation to stress, but I'm going to show you how this can have a physiological impact, and that this is a measurable tool to be able to kind of mitigate that in a second. So if you're able to mitigate this stress and sort of when you get that phone call, if you're aware that it's happening as it's happening, you can decrease the amount of stress that creates to you and amount of cortisol that floods into your system and all these like physiological impacts that come of that, right? This is Ray Dalio, my homie. He's a huge meditator. His words are, if you build this skill, it can create a profound sense of equanimity, which is like a third person objective awareness where you're kind of at peace with everything. In life, this sounds like a silver bullet, and it sort of is. Like if there is a silver bullet in life, it's building this skill of being able to be mindful through each scenario. And meditation is the tool to be able to do that. That gives you the ability to hit pause or just slow down your reaction just enough that you feel like you're able to live life in slow motion in a way, which if you're thinking about in athletics or whatever, imagine if you were a baseball player and you could actually slow down time to half speed, how much of an advantage that would be. That is the type of advantage you can have in your interpersonal communication and your own awareness throughout life. So that's like the 20, 25-minute pitch on like why and how to do this or whatever. So to put this into context for emotions, this is obviously, I just made this graph up, right? It's like outlining the principles more than like a real thing. Imagine this, and this is like an experiment, or I'm making this tool up or whatever. But imagine you get a phone call or somebody says something that like enrages you. Like you're gonna get triggered. You're at a stress level or I'll show you the graph, like 10 to 100, just 100% of pissed off. Like the thing that somebody could say to you to piss you off the most is 100, and being super chill is a 0 or a 1, right? You're starting off really chill, and then the blue dot is some input, a text message or some sort of information or insult to you. right? And that happens, and your reaction to that instantaneously jumps you from a level 10 to a level 100%, right? And what I meant by this little red line here is like, imagine this is your threshold for reaction of like doing something stupid or like saying something you regret, right? Somebody says something and you're like, fuck you, right? You probably don't want to say that in most scenarios. If you have no mindful awareness of your own emotion or control over your emotions, awareness of your thoughts and then control of your emotions, and a big stimulus comes in, you're going to come back real fast and overreact, right? And then when I say half-life, like how long will it take you, even if you're like a roid rager type person that got offended in the gym or whatever, a road rage person, that person is eventually going to calm down. Like the person that flipped you off and is road raging behind you, by the time they get home, like that person might be at a level 10 or 11 or 9 or whatever. They might be, cursing you off to their significant other for like a day, right? What you want to try to do is bring how long that is triggering you into a shorter and shorter and shorter amount of time at lower and lower levels, right? So this is almost like I'm trying to make the analogy of like you get triggered, you come to some reaction that's above a threshold of kind of a stupid response, kind of remain there for a certain amount of time. Maybe this is minutes or seconds, I don't know, right? And then eventually you're gonna calm down. So like you're still sort of pissed about it, but it's not in the forefront of your thought. And then imagine that same person came up to you at the next red light, right? And then you're gonna get triggered again, right? And so then you react twice to the same thing. And this can happen with trying to bring it into a real estate context. Like maybe it's an agent that really bothers you, and you've got to make multiple phone calls throughout the day, right? Now, imagine if you're able to improve this metric of how long you stay upset, how upset you get, and how long you get upset through this skill set, which I'm telling you is possible. Your graph would eventually look like this. So I didn't change the pink numbers, right? The pink is the same one, and the threshold is at 75% for the first red line, right? But eventually you can start to lower your thresholds, to 50%, to 25%, and draw and lower the amount of time. So like if you're in the yellow scenario, like yellow belt mindfulness level, whatever, you're still going to get triggered the first time, right? That first, I'm like making these slides up as I go along, right? You got triggered here, and you get triggered again here, right? These are the external triggers on your mind, things that would piss you off. You get triggered here. If you're, originally would have hit 100%, you download an app and you do this for a couple months. Maybe in a couple months, the same stimulus is going to hit you. Same asshole is going to do the same thing to you. And you're still going to say this stupid thing, but you just barely did. But then rapidly, you're going to be able to decrease how toxic that feels for you and that tension in your chest and all of the knock-on effects of that stress to a lower level. You're going to be at a lower level, and then if the same stimulus happens again, you get triggered again, maybe that time you don't actually go to the level of punching that person in the nose, right? Maybe then you're just giving them the middle finger, right? and there's these different levels of response or like pushback to that thing. You practice for a few more months, maybe you're a green belt now, and you barely even respond. You're able to stop yourself from even giving that person the middle finger. You might be just saying it in your head or visualizing it, which would be like this third red line, right? And then you calm down, and the second time it's barely even registering on your radar, right? And you've saved yourself whatever angst is going to come from your mindless reaction as opposed to a mindful response. Somebody write that down for me. A mindless reaction versus a mindful response. One is reactive and one is proactive. And the variable in there is your ability to be aware of your thought and then draw out your response time in the short order there. Does this make sense? Can somebody give me feedback? This is the first time I've tried to explain it to anybody. Give me a thumbs up.
It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense, man. It's a really great analogy, man. It's I love the way you're breaking it down because you're like, I'm gonna try to explain was trying to think like how I can get feedback on this. Like what you just said, you said mindless reaction.
Mindless
versus
reaction.
mindful response, right? Like, and that's the thing, man. We react, man. If I'm not, for me, if I'm not prepared for the day, and if I haven't gotten my mind right, I react, man. Like, I react, dude, and I don't want to react, right? I want to be prepared for anything, right? Like, and that's what this does. Like, that's what meditation does for me, is it just gets me. Like you were just saying, like if this thing happens, you know, you might kind of say the thing you're not supposed to say or like whatever. Like, and it's true, man. Like, it's true for me. Like in my own experience, it's true. Like, so through, dude, it's taken me years of meditation to get to the point where like, dude, I should be popping off. Like for me, I'm gonna be vulnerable with you guys. Like I should be popping off all the time. Like the kind of personality that I have, I'm very emotional, I'm very passionate, all these things, I'm very competitive. But instead, because of the way I've trained my mind, I'm able to like, not all the time. And you know, Lauren probably sees the worst, the worst of it. But like, yeah, man, I'm prepared. I'm preparing my mind. Like, and I'll just share this with you guys as I'm talking. Like, it's like the blue sky analogy, right? Like they talk about the blue sky. Like there's always a blue sky in your mind, right? Like it's like the sky on Earth. There's always a blue sky. It might be cloudy, it might be storming, but behind all that is a blue sky. And that's like a meditation that I do. It's called the blue sky meditation. And dude, in the morning, man, I don't wake up with a blue sky in my head, man. Like it might be a little cloudy, or I might be upset about something, or something might have carried over from the day before. And when I'm able to meditate and clear my brain, like I can start the day with a blue sky, right? Like there's no clouds in front of that sky. And that's what meditation does for me. And that's why I'm able to be prepared for the day. And for me, man, like for me, meditation is like, it's not about me, man. It's about the people that I care about. Like, and so like when I meditate, it's so I can show up correctly for the people that I care about. And that's my family, and that's like my partners in business, and that's like, and dude, and even it's like, dude, I care about human beings. Like I care about the people around me. Like I don't want to be mean to the person that like cuts me off, because that person might be in a rush to get to the hospital to see a family member. They might be late for work, or they might have their own stuff going on. So I just want to show up correctly for the people that I care about, and actually just like the rest of the world around me, just to kind of like, so everything's cool, man.
All right. So now, like to bring this into like a practical example. So coming into the year through stress and excess insulin resistance, pre-diabetic insulin resistance from wellness research are probably two of the major causes of, and stress causes the glucose thing. Having too much sugar in your system is one of the core pillars in creating the contributing factors to Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, cancer, all of the thing, and neurodegenerative diseases. So basically 80% of the things that kill us sooner than they should are one of the major contributing factors to that is having too much sugar in your system, right? And glucose, and having that irregularly balanced, and having your body sort of out of whack from that. That led me to understand this continuous glucose monitor. I wanted to study it. And so I was learning about how my food and my diet impacts, and diet and exercise impact my glucose levels, right? And being able to try to monitor that and understand your diet with that data. That was my motivation to get one of these things. What I found though was, this is a real graph. I had the glucose monitor for like 3 months in the beginning of the year. And I just started to realize things. When I exercise, certain things happen. You start to see the patterns and understand what your levels are at, depending on what you feel like. And I'll give you some links to understand some more of the stuff and learn about it. But anyway, this is a graph from like 6 p.m. to midnight on one particular evening. And I drew these lines on here. You can see these like giant things. This was my dinner, right? On the left over here. This was my dinner. And then here's the labels. So I had dinner and I had a glucose response. Now the graph is kind of shitty looking, but this is like a major glucose response, like a very significant spike in blood sugar, right? And then it leveled off after I digested my food, and it comes down. This is sort of a natural response. You want this curve to be, you don't want to spike, you want to kind of keep them low. And then I sort of leveled out. I had something to eat. I think I had like a little snack or whatever. And then I was like done, for the evening. That was like almost 9 o'clock at night. I had a phone call with a completely insane toxic client at this time. And this is like now a couple hours after I ate, and knowing from all 2.5 months of wearing this thing, I knew my level should have just like stayed low throughout the evening. But look what happened. It spiked insanely high really fast in the exact time of the phone call. Like the phone call triggered me to the point where I felt all those stress responses, and I was getting infuriated, and it was a very stressful call. The call ends, and look what happens. As soon as that phone call went away, I calmed down, and this is a sugar level in my blood in real time decreased. Now I had to document this phone call for legal purposes. This person was like threatening to sue us, and she was totally insane. So I had to document the phone call. So I'm reliving it in my head. I'm getting triggered again by the same stressor in my mind. Like it's not actually even happening to me. And I'm getting worked up because I'm reliving it and writing it. Then I was done with the email and I calmed down. Right? This is like getting spiked by this thing. I got super pissed off again. And then I was ruminating over this, and I stayed at this elevated stress response. And then I was aware that I was at this elevated stress response. And I was like, this is not healthy. I need to go to bed. This is like 11:39 p.m. I'm like, God damn it, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. So I busted out my meditation app, and I did a guided meditation for 20 minutes, and look what happened to my blood sugar. I didn't like inject insulin into myself. This was, I did meditation for 20 minutes. I did a guided meditation from Sam Harris's Waking Up app. And it undid all of that physiological response to the stress in 20 minutes. And that is what can happen. So then you're like at a baseline, and you're able to like cool yourself out. I went to bed. I got a good night's sleep. I woke up. And if you're able to do this, it doesn't always take 20 minutes to do it, right? You're able to do it in an instant when you get a little bit better at it. I was then able to like map out this thought process in my head and why it triggered me. So now I'm like becoming aware of what these triggers are. I'm like, wow, that was an unhealthy response that I had to something that wasn't actually going to kill me. Like nobody's going to die. It was like a deal, it didn't matter. Necessarily, it mattered to me because I had like you can't really. I put fucking freak out. Like I had a fucking freak out about this, and it was like, why was I triggered? I had pure intention. Like I was actually trying to help this lady. I thought that I was very confident that we were the best to be able to help this person in their scenario. I was being 100% factually truthful with her, just presenting the information as objectively as humanly possible. What does it say? Competence and honesty. Like I know that I'm good at what I'm doing, and I'm giving her real information. I was certain about the guidance, or relatively certain. And then I delivered it in a very cool, calm, and collected way. She couldn't hear it. She was in denial. And she rejected that back to me, that I'm a lying scumbag and I have zero experience. And I know that that's just factually not true. It's the opposite of true. That's why the reason this got, that fucks her over, because she's throwing me under the bus, and I'm the lifeguard able to help her. It fucks me over too, because I already invested all this time in this deal. I should get paid on it eventually, and I'm providing a service. I want to get paid on it. So then I have this like loop in my head that says, what the fuck? And that's the most frustrating part, is this loop that I'm in. And it brings me into this toxic place of fuck this and fuck you, right? And that's not a healthy, wholesome thing to be in. So I had to understand this programmatic recursive loop in my head, come outside of it, be aware that it's happening, and be able to neutralize it, right? This is obviously jotted down. I could make this in a flow chart, but like that's what was going on in my head. If I was not practicing meditation for 5 years leading into it, I would probably just be lost in this loop and scream and yell at this lady, which is not going to help anybody, right? That is what you're trying to do here. It's sort of this is as practical as a real estate example as I can give, to be able to like navigate these things. you then become aware of what somebody else is trapped in the loop and not getting a pissing match with them and get sucked into their shit. Right. And that happens a lot in real estate because it's a very high dollar amount. It's a very emotional thing. It's people's homes. It's a big deal to people. Not everybody has the money to not stress about 20 grand on their deal. Right. So that's how those things can help you navigate your deal. I was able to wake up and prospect in the morning and not be lost in that because I was able to detach myself from it and not get caught in that loop.
Can I ask you a question though, Gil?
Yeah.
So some people have the anger reaction when you say that this isn't only about how people react angrily as well, because like there's certain times that, and it takes a long time for me to realize and catch it. And I'll be honest, I don't do meditation, definitely something I want to look into, but I catch myself being more upset with myself or just down on myself or something like that. And that could be something just as much as a reaction of like the FU, like you were saying. That loop also is something that people need to be mindful of. Would you not agree?
You have to be aware of it. Yeah. A lot of people will not even be aware of it. You're like, what is the voice inside your head saying? Right? If you're not aware of that, it's being like, oh God, like I sent the email without an attachment. Ah, such a fucking idiot. Right? Who's I?
Right.
You get really down this rabbit hole and you start to get into the philosophy of like the illusory self, the illusion of actually being having your ego and being able to
Right.
dissolve your ego with your thoughts, not psychedelics, but like understanding that you are the awareness that you are the blue sky. You're not the thought not the cloud in the sky. You are the blue sky. That starts to get really slippery and esoteric, and it's like level 3.0, 4.0, right? The crazy part, and if you read that consciousness cookie, like Dzogchen meditate, there's certain schools and thoughts of meditation, and some of them are just like mindfulness meditation. Pay attention to your breath, and you're going to slowly climb up this mountain, and then eventually reach this level of awareness. There's another school of thought in another school of meditation called Dzogchen meditation, where they're basically like they have the pointing out instruction, and they're basically like, yo, I'm going to teleport you to the top of the mountain and like have you like understand that you have this like a light switch, not like a constant building to this, but like an instantaneous understanding that you shift in perspective from like I am a person inside my head that has these thoughts to like your existence as just an open field of awareness. Sounds crazy. It's a real thing. I'll provide some of the resources to check all that out. That's like beyond the scope of this, but this simple skill of mindfulness, and in order to be able to understand your thoughts, be aware of it, that's this is one example of how that if you get yourself out of this loop, you'll be able to do your job better, provide the service better. It's not a job. You have awareness of your emotions, you have better control of your emotions, you'll be able to hit pause for a second. You can decrease the half-life of emotions, get your ego out of the way, detach from outcomes, better focus. And then if you're able to do that, you'll be able to enjoy the job a little bit better, like the actual thing that you're doing. You'll be able to do it for a longer time, which means you'll make more money, right? And real estate's a long game. So the homework assignment or the suggestion or whatever before we do Q&A or whatever is to try it. I'm going to give Lauren an app. I have, through the Waking Up app, I have a, you can get 7 days for free. You can actually email Waking Up. He just like offers it for free. If you're like, yo, I can't afford it, he'll give it to you for free. It's like whatever. Otherwise, it's like $10 a month. Best ROI on anything I think you'll ever spend. I would suggest trying it for 30 days, 20 minutes a day, and 10 minutes a day, whatever. Do it for 30 days, see what happens. Try floating 3 times. I'll give you the link to True Rest. I know the owner, Scott. There's one in Ocean. I think they just opened up. If not, they're in Brick. It's like $200 to do it 3 times, or $300. They have like 3 packs or whatever. If you try that 3 times, the first time you're going to be like, this is kind of weird. This is interesting. You do it a couple times, and the first 3 times you might have a little bit, it's like meditation on steroids. So instead of trying to do the app for 3 months or whatever, try floating, and it's a little bit of an extent.
How many times in between?
the recommendation, like if I'm prescribing trying floating, I would do it 3 times within 2 weeks. Right, to give you an idea of like what that looks like this is, I actually really adopted the pitch deck. Like this is what the float tanks look like. You can like go in and lay down in there and
Okay.
you know, they're around. Who has questions? I'll give you the links to these articles. There's links in these articles about the apps and things like that. I'll give you a link to a free 7-day trial of Waking Up, and yeah, if you go.
Would you mind sharing the slides that you're using?
Yeah, I can make a PDF of this, sure. Or we'll have a link to this training recorded too. Here's a little bit more explaining of all this kind of stuff, and then recommended resources. There's a bunch of podcasts, apps, introductions, partial list of books, like read all these books that I've read, like, you know, whatever. That's the consciousness cookie crumb. That's like the curriculum notes. This is like about the meditation apps themselves specifically, and why Waking Up is the one to get with. It's for beginners and experts, and it's like by the right guy. And then this is the website for Waking Up, and they have conversations, they have practices, and all kinds of stuff. There's like a whole courses in here. It's like bar none the best resource for this, I would say. If it's a little
Gil,
bit,
can I ask a quick question?
yeah. Use the rest for
When
Q&A.
you talked about the glucose monitor, was that an app? Was it your watch, or was it something you wore?
It's both.
Okay, we'll talk about this later.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of links to that stuff too, and how to get it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I think I actually put that in the in this list of resources in this meditation links thing. Yeah, CGM stuff. You should watch this YouTube video with the CEO of Levels, and there's a podcast with Peter Attia with the CEO of Dexcom, the company of the thing that I got. If you listen to these 2 links, you'll get up to speed on continuous glucose monitors.
Gil, I have a question on the flotation tanks. You showed 2 of them. One looked very claustrophobic and the other one looked bigger, where there was a little bit more space around you. Are there different kinds of tanks?
Yeah, this is like a pod, and the other one I showed is like a room. You can leave them both open if you feel claustrophobic. It's like once you get in them, they're actually pretty large, and you can actually leave it open. Just, you know, you can leave the lights on. You're in a private room, you can do whatever you want, you know. So like there's a room with a shower, and this one is like an 8x12 room in there. So you step inside of it, and it's like a giant room.
Yeah, that one looks less claustrophobic than the pod does.
Sure. It's definitely a bigger space. And what I'm trying to get at is you could actually just do the entire float with the lid to the pod open, like open to the entire room. It's not recommended. Like there's a whole science behind how and why that works. And the ultimate thing is to have no light, no sound, no temperature gradient. The water is at the exact temperature of the outside of your skin, which is not 98.7. It's like 94.5 degrees. Like the outside of your skin should be at a different temperature than your internal temperature. No light, no sound, no vibration, no gravity. That's why you're floating in Epsom salt. So like your vestibular system's not activated. Like it's very well thought out by this guy, John Lilly, who invented the tanks. I could do a whole thing on float tanks and stuff, but so the problem with meditation is like a lot of times you're sitting here, you're going to be like, my ass hurts from this chair. Right? Or like, oh my, I smell myself, whatever. You're going to notice something in a chair. When you go into the float tank, the reason this is such a life hack is it is mitigating all of the sensory input, which is like just a seed for a thought to happen. So you're taking away the stimulus. You're taking away all the stimuli. And if you do that, it's like if you shake up a glass of like muddy water and you let it sit for 5 minutes, it's still going to be muddy, right? And that's what people are doing. They're like, they download Headspace or Calm, and they're like, they sit there and they're like thinking about all the shit that they've got to do today and why this is a waste of their time because they have to go and do X, Y, and Z, and now I got to go call that client. And they're thinking about their to-do list, and they're thinking with their eyes closed the whole entire time. They never achieve any sort of mindful awareness. And then they look back on that and they're like, that was a waste of 20 minutes. Why did I do that for a week? I should have been using those 20 minutes to be productive to achieve the peace, right? They never actually got to a point of awareness. They just were thinking with their eyes closed.
Yeah.
Now, if you go into the tank, you're going to be in there for an hour. I reckon you want to go for even longer. Like I like to go for 90 minutes. I did a 4.5-hour float one time. And when you do that, the first hour, you're going to be thinking about everything. All these thoughts are going to come into your mind. What you should be doing otherwise. Oh, this is weird. I'm floating. All of the things will come into your mind, and eventually, your conscious mind will like run out of shit to throw at you, and there's nothing left. And that is what you're trying to get at. Is when all the sediment settles, what is clear there? That is what you need to get to when you're there. So I know this sounds crazy. Remember the dinosaur analogy? There is something there. I recommend you try it and get back to me. So we'll cut it for time. And if you guys got questions, ping me otherwise.
That was
Thank
great,
you. That was
Bill.
very
Good stuff.
informative. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wait.
I'll see you guys in 10 minutes, and see you guys on the Flex Mastermind in a few minutes.
Yeah, and Louis, I'm gonna get all the links for you and I'll email it to you once I get it from Gil.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Gil.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.